Will Travis Etienne rebound big time against the Panthers this week for your fantasy football teams? And can you ride DeAndre Swift and Kenneth Walker to your championship? It's time to break it down right here and right now as we look at running back and quarterback rankings only on Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We are here into Week 17. We got a full slate of games here, hoping to determine some fantasy football season-long championships for many of you who play this as the final week. Some of you are playing into Week 18. Regardless, it's a very important week there for fantasy football and for DFS. We'll get into our running back and quarterback rankings today. We'll have wide receivers and tight ends tomorrow. So we'll get you set here before you fill things out here, starting with the Thursday night affair between the Jets and Browns. Before we dive into that, I do have to tell you this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We are Locked On Fantasy Football, your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day, especially now in the playoffs. I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. I'm not do this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst at NFL.com.
All right, so we got the intro and all that good stuff out of the way. I think we need to dive in, Michelle, and give some people some really good advice here. And there's some players, especially running back, that have been disappointing, right? Big names have not come through. So let's start with the one name that might make a few people cringe. He might have helped eliminate some people last week. But if you survive with Travis Etienne, and the question is, can you play him against the Panthers? The Panthers have a bad run defense. They're at home. What do you think, Michelle? Etienne, I know we can't totally trust him, but where do you have him this week?
So we're completely different on him, right? Like you have him all the way up at running back 6. I have him at running back 25. Like if I rostered him and I made it this far, I'm still playing him because like you brought up, it's a nice matchup. We know he's super talented, but my worry is, I mean, he hasn't had a huge week since week 8, right? Hasn't been inside the top 12 running backs in any week since week 8. In the last 2 weeks, been running back 30, running back 47. My scare is that this offense isn't clicking right now, right? The injuries to Trevor Lawrence and just the offense overall is struggling, and his rushing attempts have gone way down the last 4 weeks. 11 carries, 14 carries, 10 carries, and then just 6 carries last week. Do I expect him to be better than his 6 carries for 12 yards last week? For sure. I'm just a little bit worried overall about this offense and about the scoring opportunities he'll have.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff you talk about is exactly why I like him this week. I think it's overcorrection city here. They're losing games, right? They've lost 4 straight games. And look, they've been fortunate to still stay in first place somehow in the AFC South because the Colts and Texans are not coming through the way they should. So when we look at it, this is a game they absolutely must win. They can't mess around anymore, or it's going to be tough to even make the playoffs at this point. So they need to win it. They've not given Etienne enough. This is actually a good matchup. We know the Panthers have been one of the best. We know they give up touchdowns. That was Etienne's calling card like early in the season, right? That's what the Panthers do. So I'm feeling if CJ Beathard has to play, they're going to lean on Etienne even more. But what I don't understand is if you're hurting there and you don't have a lot behind Calvin Ridley, get him more involved with the passing game. So I think this is the thing. You're going to see Etienne get some touches this week. But if he can get 15 to 20, and that's what it comes down to, I think he'll have a fine game, and I think he could live up to that expectation of exploding. And we've seen it before, right? He can explode for big games. He seems to be a little bit of a boomer bust player in that sense. So I think that makes a lot of sense where we have him ranked. You either trust him to really do well, or you really want to fade him. So look, I still think, as we both said, you play him, but I like him a lot more this week, just purely based on the squeaky wheel and the really good matchup.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you're still gonna play him likely. I'm worried. I'm worried about him. The efficiency has also been garbage too, so he's going to need a ton of touches. Like he doesn't look like he did at the end of last year. he's lucky to average 3 yards per carry in any given game. But let's talk about James Cook, because he really disappointed last week after having a handful of really great games there. But he still got 20 carries last week. He just didn't get any receptions. It was just that kind of game, running a lot. 20 carries, he didn't get into the end zone and no reception. So you're not going to have a great fantasy week. But because of that volume, I'm still happy to plug him into my lineup against the Patriots. And I think he bounces back. He should get some receptions in this game, and hopefully he can find the end zone.
Yeah, I was very disappointed about the no receptions part. I thought that was the one thing I felt the best about. Like, they were going to have to get him involved in the passing game. They just didn't do that. Maybe this is why they struggled, right? To finish off the Chargers, like, get him involved anywhere you can. Like, they kind of went away from him all of a sudden, and then they pivoted, of course, to Gabe Davis and making a big play, and he ended up helping them win. So I don't think they're going to have that type of plan. So James Cook is going to be fine. I think the volume will add up to a little bit more this week. And I think if the Patriots take away something, I think it might be the deep ball this week. It's hard to know because Cook has been really good, but the Patriots are going to trust their run defense, and Cook is still really talented to break free from that. And Stephon Diggs hasn't really been the threat they've been thinking about as much. So Cook is going to get it done here. It's at home. The Patriots, you can move the ball on them. And look, we also saw Javante Williams score on them. So you can do that, even if your day is a little bit of a grind with the efficiency.
Yeah, I'm happy to play James Cook this week. I have him ranked right outside my top, or actually, I have him all the way at running back 5. I'm really high on him this week. I expect him to end in the top 12. If he gets a touchdown, that will be pretty important there to be all the way up at running back 5 this week. But what about DeAndre Swift and Kenneth Walker, right? So DeAndre Swift gets an amazing matchup against the Cardinals this week, but both of these guys have been pretty inconsistent throughout the year. They have the skill set and the opportunity to have huge weeks, but also have just disappeared. We both have them ranked inside the top 12 this week, but I'm definitely feel much more confident about DeAndre Swift in this matchup.
Yeah, the Cardinals do allow the most fantasy points now to running backs, and they've just been gashed everywhere. The Eagles kind of found their running game last week. What we want is a little less of Ken Gainwell, right? If we're a Swift manager, maybe you want Gainwell if you're looking for a flex play that's out there this week. But Swift is the guy, and we've seen him go off. When you get the 23, 25 touches, somewhere in that range, he's going to deliver. And we know most of them are going to come on the ground. They just don't throw to running backs as much. And if they do, it's often Gainwell. So just stick with the run. It worked. Take pressure off your passing game. And really, the Cardinals have slowly improved against passing games. Look at last week. Their corners are pretty good. Even without Byron Murphy, they pretty much shut down DJ Moore last week. So it's got to be more about the running game. It's the slump buster for the Eagles. It did that last week to some degree. So stick with it. Get your defense tuned as well. It takes the pressure off them. So I think Swift has a big, big game this week. And all pretty much on the ground, and let's just not hope that Gainwell steals a good chunk of that or even a touchdown from him, and I'll feel good. Now, Walker, look, he's had dealing with the injuries and Zach Charbonnet, but I think he's looked sharp here in the last couple of weeks, right? Run well, been a big part of why they won. Now, the numbers haven't been massive, but we know the Steelers can give up some rushing yards here in this type of situation, and he typically is better at home as well, and he also gets involved in the passing game. So I like both of these guys, and I think they're going to get the volume we're looking for this week.
Yeah, a big part about both of these guys does come down to touchdown. I know that's hard to say, but how many times have we seen DeAndre Swift go down at the 1 yard line? And when that happens, 1000% the Eagles are just going to do the tush push because they're always going to get it, and they always do it. So, as soon as they get into that 1 yard line, your opportunity for Swift getting a touchdown goes away. Now, luckily, he got another opportunity, and he actually got in a little bit further away from the goal line. But that's what it comes down to for Swift. Walker and run on the Steelers. The Steelers are so random. Their defense is very inconsistent. You never know if they're going to dominate or completely stink it up. But I think both of these guys are good plays this week. But what about another two guys that have been insanely inconsistent, and we had huge expectations for them this year, but came through last week. So you have Benjon Robinson against the Bears and Breece Hall against the Browns, both on the road. Who are you more confident in and having a good performance this week, or do you like both?
Well, based on the matchup, I'm going to say it's Bijan Robinson because the Bears, they're sneaky. They're very good against the run, but they give up a lot of fantasy points to backs because they're not very good at covering backs. I mean, they invested some in linebacker, but they haven't really been all that effective in covering this position. So Bijan can get it done that way. Now we also go back to our head. It's Arthur Smith. He's going to let us down again. He was fine at home. They get back. They overcorrect to Benjon Robinson. They win the game. So maybe that says we want to follow this game plan again. Look, it's really tough. Again, straight up running around the Bears. So that actually is good, right? That means we won't see some Tyler Algier pounding up the middle, right? We'll see Bijan Robinson on the outside a little bit, catching passes. So I think he can catch 5 or 6 passes in this one. I can feel confident about that. I think he'll get the touches. Where Breece Hall, look, he's the same deal. Same thing with his coach, right? Up and down with the touches, right? If he gets the touches, 15 touches, then he's fine because you know he's going to bust a long one. Even against the Browns defense, someone is going to fall, something like that. He's going to make a move. He's that explosive, right? Just have to give him the touches. So if I can say both would get the same amount of touches and say that number is 20, I'd feel pretty darn good about both of them. But I think I trust Bijan to get the catches for sure a little bit more than Breece Hall, and the matchup is definitely tougher for him.
Yeah, I feel you with Bijan. It definitely is going to have to come to the receiving game. And you said that's a good thing. You know, maybe we won't see Tyler Algier as much, but Arthur Smith is going to beg. I'm going to prove everyone wrong. Everyone's going to expect us to come up passing. I'm going to run with Tyler Algier 20 times. The thing with Breece Hall that scares me is he saw 16 targets last week. And if it's Trevor Siemian again, cool. Like maybe he'll get a lot of targets, but if it goes back to Zach Wilson and he doesn't get those targets, I don't think he's going to be super efficient on the ground. You start both of these guys, but feel better about Bijan Robinson. And we'll talk about some harder decisions at the running back position in our next segment. But we have to talk about one of our fine sponsors first. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you'll have. It's the fastest-growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get tickets up your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. And tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, all you have to do is just create an account on the Game Time app and redeem code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Okay, Vinny, this episode is just talking about these inconsistent running backs, right? And at the top here, at the top here has to be Javante Williams. You have him ranked at running back 15. You're feeling a bit confident of him this week. I am down at running back 33. So a big difference here for us. He gets the Chargers, so you probably like the matchup, but he even scored a touchdown last week and still just got over 10 fantasy points in full PPR league, with still the running back 26 on the week. I don't like starting Javante Williams.
Yeah. Look, I'm trusting the fact that the Broncos are pretty high favorites in this game. They should be playing with someone to lead, and that means we probably won't see those weird dump-offs to Samaje Perine that they force when they're trailing in games, and those type of things won't occur. And we also look at this matchup. I mean, the Chargers were okay against the run early, but that's really not the design of their defense. And Joey Bosa, losing him as a run stopper on the edge has really made them pretty weak here. So Javante has a good game. I think a lot of these guys are playing also for next year. It's not looking good for the Broncos to make the playoffs anymore after their 0-3 start. So they got to play for some jobs under Sean Payton in 2023. There's going to be, or 2024, there's going to be some things in flux, we know, with his offense, with some free agency issues, things like that. So I think Williams is one of those guys. He's very talented. I think he was misused a lot of the season here with Sean Payton and their play calling with Joe Lombardi. So I think, again, Javante Williams has one last really good game this week against the Chargers. I'm not going to feel it next week, maybe against the Raiders, who been playing improved defense, but I do like him this week. And look, part of it, again, game script and just usage. kind of taking a leap of faith every time, really, in trusting these coaches to give these guys the ball enough to produce.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to have to touch the ball like 25 times because, I mean, the last 2 weeks, 12 carries, 11 carries, but he hasn't averaged more than 3 yards per carry, like has not hit the 4 yards per carry mark since week 7. There's a lot of games of really terrible efficiency. I scored twice on the year. I'm not wanting to trust Javante, but without, they're sitting Russell Wilson. So with Jarrett Stidham, maybe they run it like crazy. And that's kind of what you have to go to there. Now, what about Derrick Henry? Because it feels like he's been a disaster, but really, I mean, 4 of the last 5 weeks has been really great for Derrick Henry. He's finished as a top 10 running back in 4 of the last 5 weeks. It was just that 1 week he absolutely killed you. That week happened to be against the Texans, who he has to face this week. Is it another terrible week for him, or does he bounce back against this defense?
Well, last week we got lucky because he threw a touchdown pass, and I guess you got 4 points or 6 points for that. So that was nice. But yeah, it's kind of weird. He goes as the team goes a little bit. And if they are going to fall behind, we know it's not really good for Derrick Henry. And we've seen him go microscopic right against this team with some good volume. But he's got to want to run on a high note here, right? This is probably the last 2 games he's going to be in a Titans uniform. They've got to trust him a little bit and pound it. And look, it might help that you have a defense that's kind of reeling right now, right? They didn't play well at all against Cleveland last week. So that's a good time to get them. Will Anderson Jr. looks like he could miss another game here. Pretty vulnerable. So if they can keep it close, then Derrick Henry's going to be the game. I think it will be pretty close because I don't know how much offense you're going to get, even if CJ Stroud returns. It's a tough thing to just come back and play after a couple weeks off, a little bit of rust there. So I think it's going to be lower scoring, kind of grindy type game, and that's going to be fine for Derrick Henry to get the volume. But again, we're going to say it again with a lot of these backs, probably a bit touchdown dependent, but that's what Derrick Henry does.
Yeah, that's really what Derrick Henry is. But when you have 2 for 7 touchdowns over the last 5 games, it makes you feel a little bit better about his chances. I see a difference in this Aaron Jones ranking as well. So you have him down at running back 30. I'm at running back 14, maybe a little too high for him there. But when you have a guy that's getting 21 carries like he did last week, I know AJ Dillon took his touchdown from him. He's not getting used enough as a receiver either, so it doesn't make you feel as safe. Finish as a running back 16 last week, finish as an RB 23 the week prior. So that's doable, right? That's a doable RB2. That's kind of where I have him, probably up towards his ceiling there, RB 14 this week. But I do think your running back 30 might be a little too low for him.
Yeah, this matchup last week was really good, right, against the Panthers, and I really liked Aaron Jones last week. I don't like him that much this week. The Vikings are actually okay against the run, but I just feel like this game is going to be 2 teams are going to realize, oh, these teams are passing. We're just going to forget about the running game. And Aaron Jones, again, if he's not catching enough passes there and if he's not getting the red zone work, I hate that combination for a running back, right? Somebody else scores, not catching passes. Then he's got to get everything in between the 20s. And that's hard to pile up enough fantasy points that way, right? Even if you get volume. So that's my one concern there, that this game could go either way. I'm not sure where the game script is going. Are they going to be ahead? Are they going to be behind? It's going to be back and forth. But I could just see a lot of passing between Jordan Love, and we'll find out who the starting quarterback is for the Vikings. They've been keeping that close to the vest with Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs and even Jaron Hall in the mix. So I have no idea. That could affect things, right? If it's Jaron Hall, I might all of a sudden feel better about Aaron Jones if they're playing from ahead. But if it's Nick Mullins, I'm going to think it's shootout city. So there's a lot of things, and maybe somewhere in between if Josh Dobbs starts. So it's really tough with Jones, but I'm glad I don't have to make this decision. I'll say that because I didn't really want to start him. And I'm right there with him and Tony Pollard. Like, Tony Pollard is hard for me to want to play this week. Maybe I'm reverse jinxing him, but I just don't feel great if I look at those guys in my starting lineups this week.
Yeah, Tony Pollard at this point is just being started because he was drafted early.
Yeah,
I feel like he would just keep starting him for that. He's really been
can't
pretty
run at the goal line.
yeah, really extremely disappointing this year. Najee Harris and James Conner, those 2 guys I think are good plays this week. I mean, unfortunately, James Conner has a tougher matchup against the Eagles, but he has been absolutely killing it. I mean, running back 5, 11, and 4 over his last 3 games played. really great. He's getting the volume, he's getting the goal line work, he's getting targets. Obviously, keep an eye on Kyler Murray. He is dealing with an injury. I'm not sure if he's going to play or not, but if he does, I really like James Conner. And then Najee Harris. I think Mason Rudolph at least opens up this offense a bit, will allow him to have more opportunities around the goal line. Saw a nice week out of him last week, and he gets a really nice matchup against the Seahawks, who have allowed the second most rushing touchdowns to running backs this season.
Yeah, you're seeing that Najee is a talented back, and sometimes he needs a little bit of help, open up the offense, give him some better blocking, and he's going to do well. I mean, he's a good back. And look at the Seahawks. They're pretty weak in the middle. It really surprised me. They traded for Leonard Williams, and they're still not very good at stopping the run. That kind of pounds at them a little bit. And you're right. I mean, just the threat now, Mason Rudolph planted the seed that, okay, they could throw deep here with George Pickens. We got to play our safeties a little bit back, worry about the big play just a little bit, which they weren't doing. That's going to open some running lanes. And the other thing that's happened is Jalen Warren is, I don't know what's happened to him, but he's not been as effective as a change of pace. And we know Harris can catch passes too, so that's good if needed and stay on the field to do that. But I do like Harris quite a bit this week. And really, if you look at these backs, they said goodbye to Connor in Pittsburgh and brought in Harris. They're kind of similar, right? You can use them in the pass game when you want. They're really good. If you get them near the goal line, they're going to pretty much come through. So very similar. And James Conner, what surprised me is that it doesn't matter if the rushing matchup is brutal. He still gets some work in the passing game that doesn't always happen for these type of backs. And he's also catching passes a little bit. So really, I think the Cardinals, if you look at their trajectory, I think they've just improved overall as an offense and defense with every week and figuring out how to get the key guys going. So yeah, there's no way I'm sitting James Conner anymore. I mean, we tried that a few times with him in tougher matchups and he still came through. Don't do it against the Eagles in this one.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And then lastly, just keep an eye on Isaiah Pacheco. If he doesn't make it through the concussion protocol, then Clyde Edwards-Helaire becomes a fantastic play against the Bengals. I even would like him more than I feel more confident in Clyde Edwards-Helaire than I do in his quarterback scoring fantasy point this week in Patrick Mahomes. But we'll get into the quarterback rankings next segment.
Yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire would be an easy, borderline RB1 this week. That's how good he can be. So we'll get into some quarterbacks there. Speaking of looking at the quarterbacks, including Patrick Mahomes, we'll do that in our final segment. But we got to hear more about our exciting game from Prize Picks. All right, Prize Picks. I love when we get to Friday and we can make our Prize Picks of the week. Last week, my Bryce Young rushing Prize Picks came through for the second time in 3 weeks. So there's always something to play in every game. That's what it tells you there. Hey, if I'd played Bryce Young more on his passing yards, that would have been good too last week. Who knew? But that's why I love this game, Prize Picks. And that's why you will too, because look at the stat projections. And as a fantasy player, Michelle and I, we always kind of go more, right? It's more because that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for guys that are going to bust out, but you might be looking for those less to take advantage. So you just pick 2 to 6 players. Prize Picks has projection. You just pick more or less with those guys, and more players you pick and get right, the more you're going to hit on and win there. It's really the most fun you can have playing daily fantasy sports. Trust me, I do enjoy it quite a bit. It's really great. And they also have a reboot policy there. So if your injuries are in play, even if your players get injured there, so you can keep the rest in play. That's for football and basketball. If you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player's rebooted. So that's really nice there. It's the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So check it out. There's a variety of things that you can expect there. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Just download it. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL for first deposit match up to $100. Again, check it out. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. And check out our Prize Picks picks of the week on Friday. All right, Michelle, it is time to close the show and look at our quarterbacks. And you did mention Clyde Edwards-Helaire's quarterback. So, again, I'm reluctantly, putting Patrick Mahomes in the top 7 this week. Again, you have it 8. It's just so hard to put him too far down. The matchup is good against the Bengals. So I think he'll rebound. I just can't tell you exactly what he's going to do. But one guy that I can tell you I think is going to have a big week is Dak Prescott. I am all the way at number 2. You have him at 2 too, behind Jalen Hurts. So explain why we think Dak Prescott is going to blow up after a couple modest games in a row and losses.
Yeah, I mean, after that stretch there where he was just destroying it for fantasy, it's been 3 weeks now where he's had disappointing performances to what you expected, right? But there are harder matchups. I mean, he's went through this 3-game stretch now against the Eagles, who are a divisional opponent, against the Bills in Buffalo, and then against the Dolphins in Miami. Now he gets the Lions. He's back at home. And I just think, like, against this Lions defense, he's going to destroy them. Like, I think the Cowboys are going to come home and destroy the Lions. Like, maybe it's a close game because maybe the Lions keep up as well, but I think they put a ton of points on the board and destroy their defense. So I would be fine actually putting Dak Prescott ahead of Jalen Hurts this week. I have Hurts first, Dak second, but I do envision a massive week from Dak this week.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be. I mean, the Lions, that's their weakness. You really can't run on them. Tony Pollard stinks. Lions should put up some points. It all lines up pretty well. And Prescott's also at home where he plays better. And the whole team is undefeated. Yeah. Last undefeated team at home in the NFL this season. Now, Brock Purdy's a hard one, right? It was hard. If you were eliminated by Brock Purdy's performance, sorry to hear that. But we move on here. And now we have to consider if we want to play him. Now he's in the main slate again, right? They're back in the 1 p.m. window there. So if you're thinking about him in DFS, it might be a good contrarian play because might be everyone's pivoting. He's expensive, and that's the thing, is that people may not pay up to get him. But this matchup against the Commanders is fantastic. I think it's a very high floor matchup. We've seen it every single week against every quarterback that goes against them. Now, there's one concern that Breece Hall, McCaffrey could have a Breece Hall-like game, but keep in mind that had 100 receiving yards right there. So I would look at Brock Purdy, and just in case the stinger lingers and they don't feel great about it, you can look at Sam Darnold too as a cheap streamer that will come into play. I'm not going to say he's going to be as high as Purdy, but look, the weapons are too good. The matchups are great all across the board for all the weapons. I think Brock Purdy has a big rebound game this week if you're able to survive and advance with him this week.
Yeah, if you have him, and like you said, if you survived, I think he plays. Like, they're still playing for the number 1 seed in the NFC. Yeah. They need to win this game because then they get the Rams in week 18. So they really just need to win this game, make sure they lock up that number 1 seed. And Brock Purdy's going to come out and just be fantastic. Just a handful of weeks ago, we saw him be the quarterback 25 on the week. The very next week, he was the quarterback 2. So I'm not worried about it. Like, yeah, it was a disastrous game against the Ravens, who are extremely hard defense. Washington has the exact opposite defense. So happy to play him if you somehow made it through with Purdy in your lineup, or maybe you had him on your bench, luckily, and now you can start him this week. But let's talk about some harder decisions here. We actually have these 3 guys ranked in a row, both of us, and from our quarterbacks 9 through 11, right? So it's Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, and CJ Stroud. We do have them in a slightly different order. So I have Jared Goff at 9, Stroud at 10, Baker at 11. You have it Goff at 9, Baker at 10, Stroud at 11. But they are back to back for me. And if you had to choose one that you feel confident in that will at least get you 18 points, who would it be?
Yeah, I'm only going to say this because of the matchup he's in, and there might be more passing involved, is Jared Goff. And look, this narrative about him, play him at home, don't play him away. Look, just don't stick with that, right? Trends are meant to be broken. And also, this is not like he's playing in the elements, right? I mean, it's Dallas. It's pretty comfortable here in Jerry World. And look, the only reason Jared Goff typically does not go off in games is because Jahmyr Gibbs and Dave Montgomery score too many times. Like, he just misses out on a few touchdowns. But can he get a long touchdown? That's the first question you ask. Yes, he can, because the Cowboys give it up in one-on-one coverage. It could be a shot to James Williams. Okay, you're good there. Imran St. Brown, same Laporta. There's plenty of weapons, right? I mean, he's going to be fine, and he's going to have to throw it up here in a very high total, right? It's well over 50 for this game, so you know things are going to go back and forth. So you want to be attached to the game as much as possible. Now, Baker Mayfield could be in a sneaky shootout, right? The Saints and Buccaneers defense are not playing all that well, but when you look at where do I feel the best about the touchdowns coming? I mean, it's pretty even between Goff and Mayfield. I could really flip a coin and play either this week. I think Mayfield will get the slight edge, maybe if you're going for I'll say if you're going for floor, because he's at home. If you're looking for ceiling and a lot of garbage throwing, you look for Jared Goff and maybe a little bit more volatility. Like you might have to live with a couple interceptions, but it could be 350 and 3 for him with 2 interceptions versus like 250 and 2 and a clean game for Mayfield.
Yeah, I like that Mayfield's home, right? Like I like that it's not at New Orleans, because that I do just feel like their defense shows up better at home.
Yeah.
The Saints defense, they've always had their inconsistencies on defense. I just feel like over the last few years, especially under Dennis Allen, it's like sometimes they shine and they're absolutely dominant, and then sometimes they just fall apart and allow so many yards and touchdowns. I do feel the best with Jared Goff, like you said, and with CJ Stroud coming back, like I mean, he has Nico Collins. He has Noah Brown. Like, he has his weapons, right? He doesn't have Tank Dell. So I still think he's a fine play. I just feel better about Jared Goff and Baker Mayfield. Now, let's talk about Tua Tagovailoa against the Ravens. How low is too low to rank him? Because I don't think I have him low enough, honestly. I mean, just looking at the last 5 weeks here, quarterback 22, 10. Cool. That's good. 23, 23, 20. So he's been very bad for fantasy. The Ravens, who he has to play, they just destroyed the 49ers defense. They're allowing the second fewest points to quarterbacks this season. I don't want to play Tua at all.
Yeah, you'll be surprised who I have ranked ahead of him. He has got the same initials, and he's confirmed to be the starting quarterback for this team in Week 17. But I have Tyrod Taylor ahead of Tua because the matchup is really good, actually, for Tyrod Taylor. He's at home against the Rams. He's a big arm dude that can throw downfield. The Rams coverage allows some running for quarterback. So that's how I look at it this week. And why? Because what is it? It's Tua and Tyreek Hill, right? Jalen Waddle's not going to play. There's no way. He's a high ankle sprain. He could be shut down for the rest of the regular season here. So it's definitely in the works here. So when you look at that, what are they going to do in this game? I think their best chance is to run the ball quite a bit. And the one place where Tua could get some numbers is through throwing to the backs, right? If Devin Etienne explodes in the open field and does that, but we know the Ravens are pretty good linebacker. I don't think they're going to allow Etienne to just go flying all down the field, right? They've got some speed there. So that's the problem. I don't see where the points come from. Do you really trust Cedric Wilson Jr. or Durham Smythe or any of these guys? Even River Craycraft missed last week's game. So these type of guys are not available here. So I just have a hard time envisioning against this Ravens secondary that's coming off a great game. They did give up some numbers, by the way, to Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle. I just don't see it, right? I mean, it's going to be easy. Just bracket and stop Tyreek or stop Jalen Waddle or Tyreek Hill, I should say, without Waddle, and then take your chances with the running game. So I don't see a path to good numbers here for Tua, and that's where I struggle.
Yeah, I cannot imagine actually counting on him in my fantasy championship.
No. And this is where he's been ranked almost all season, or where he's finished, right? Overall, if you look at where he is, this is where he is. So we rank him exactly the kind of quarterback he's been all season, especially when he's without one of his receivers.
Yeah. And then really quickly to finish up the quarterbacks in this episode, if you had to go with one, would you rather go with Joe Flacco against the Jets or Jake Browning against the Chiefs? Jets are obviously the hardest team to play against, right, for quarterbacks with fantasy points, but the Chiefs aren't easy either. They're allowing the 6th fewest points per quarterbacks this season. So Flacco's been good. Browning's kind of disappearing. Which way would you go?
Well, if people were listening, they should know that if you can pick up Tyrod Taylor, do it now. And if this is your choice, go do it right now. Because when you look at this, I mean, don't play into this. Two things that Flacco could be a trap with, right? It's a revenge game. He's going to be fired up to play the Jets at home. The other thing is going to be looking at his past 3 weeks. Don't look at the past. This is a terrible matchup for all quarterbacks. We've been fading everybody against the Jets. Joe Flacco is not some superhuman that's going to cut through this and make plays. It's also a low-scoring Thursday night game, so no. And Jake Browning, look, if you watch Aiden O'Connell in the second half of that game, it was painful. He was just laid up there for the Chiefs to take the game. He wasn't completing any passes to anyone, anywhere. So look at this game. You got L'Jarius Sneed possibly on T. Higgins with no Jamar Chase. Where his points going to come from, I'm not sure. And the Chiefs are pretty good covering tight ends as well. So I don't see a lot of Pats, again, into scoring for either of these guys. So I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and if you've got Jerome Ford this week, I think that's going to be really good for those guys because you can run on these two teams pretty well. And you look at Joe Mixon as well on the other side. I think it's going to line up well for him to have a better game. And again, you might be really fading the quarterbacks hard in these particular matchups, and that includes Patrick Mahomes. So let's hope that he comes through in this matchup there for us because we really need it. I mean, come on. This is the Bengals at home. You didn't do it against the Raiders at home. Do it there. But Browning or Flacco, I will try to pivot off that really hard this week. There's no reason to put yourself into that fire.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Amari Cooper and T. Higgins on tomorrow's episode when we rank our wide receivers and tight ends.
Yeah, good stuff there for sure, and we'll break it down. Again, critical week, and again, we're still talking about changing fortunes at running back and quarterback. I'm sure we're going to look at a lot of that wide receiver and tight end as well. So thanks again for joining us. It's been a good holiday week as we pivot to week 17 here. We're locked on fantasy football. This has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.